Now across live to London, where British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak delivers his first speech in the new year. Let's listen.
To eliminate the waits for 1.5 years, practically, by about April of this year. And by spring of next year, we will have practically eliminated those waiting over a year, with the overall waiting list falling. And then lastly, we're keen to introduce legislation as soon as practically possible. Ultimately, Parliament decides how long it takes to pass that legislation. But in all of these things, I've deliberately not put a specific month on each of them, because I don't think that's responsible or the right thing to do with goals that are so complicated, where many of the forces that will impact our ability to hit them are out of my control as well, right? And we've seen that over the past year or two. But what I am being very clear about is what I am prioritising, what I am keen to deliver for the country in terms that I think are easy to understand and unambiguous. I fully expect the country to hold me and the government to account for how much effort we're putting in to working on those priorities, which are their priorities, and then ultimately, how and when we deliver them. But that's why I'm being crystal clear about what we're doing and why. In the interest of time, actually, I think, well, hopefully you can digest the speech in longer time, but I think the country at the moment has a very clear set of priorities that they want their government to focus on. Those are the 5 promises I made. It's about halving inflation, growing the economy, reducing debt, cutting waiting times, and stopping the boats. Those are our 5 immediate priorities. So today, I sketched out the better future for our children and grandchildren that I want to create. That is not the work of, as I said, 1 year or 1 parliament, but that is the journey that I want our country to go on, and I'm really confident that we can make good progress on that as well. In the interest of trying to get as many of your colleagues in as possible, I'll ask people just to limit themselves to 1 question, if that's okay going forward. Ben Riley-Smith from The Telegraph.
Thank you, Prime Minister. 1 question with an A and a B, if that's all right. Your plan for growth, you said you wanted to reduce the tax burden. I know you're not going to set the spring budget here, but how likely do you think it is you might be able to reduce the tax burden with the spring budget? And also, you talked about getting people back into work. Could you give me 1 specific policy idea, new policy idea you're looking at to do that?
Well, I think, Ben, on both of those, I'm not going to preempt what the Chancellor does in the spring budget. I certainly preferred it when I had his job, when the Prime Minister didn't do that, and I'll try and stick by that. But look, I'd repeat what I said in the speech. I think work is really important. It's important not just because it provides financial security. Of course, it does that for us and our families. But I think work provides people with purpose, provides them with dignity and confidence. It's something to be celebrated and rewarded, which is why, as soon as we are able to, I want to cut taxes on working people. That's something that I think the Chancellor is also aligned on. But right now we've got a set of challenges that we're grappling with, and that's a priority, as I've outlined. And with regard to inactivity, there's a range of things that we are looking at that the Chancellor and the Work and Pension Secretary are working on together. And there's, again, with all of these things, there's no one thing that will make the difference. There's probably a range of things. But as I mentioned in the speech, we need to look at how our welfare system is operating. And is it operating in the way that we would like, to make sure that we are supporting, incentivizing people who can be to be in work? And that's the work that we started some of, but clearly there's lots of options that we can look at there, and that's why I mentioned it specifically. But as I said, the budget is a time for these types of things, and the Chancellor will make those announcements in due course. Steve Swinford from The Times.
Prime Minister, you've said that you want to stop the boats. Can I ask, what exactly do you mean by that? Or do you mean that there will just be fewer small boat crossings, just to get some definition around that key delivery target of yours?
Yeah. So, Steve, I think ultimately the country will judge, as I said, right? The country will be the judge of whether we as a government are straining every sinew to focus on their priorities and deliver meaningful progress and change on them. Now, when I made a statement in Parliament last month about small boats, I went out of my way to say, look, this is not an easy problem to fix, right? And it's not one that we can fix overnight, and it requires lots of different things to be changed. Now, we've made progress on that already. The new deal with France means that there's 40% more patrols happening in France, which is making a difference to us. The new deal with Albania will enable us to return more illegal migrants who have come here from that country back to where they're from. They accounted for 1/3 of all small boat crossings in the latter part of last year. So that can make a really big difference. But the most important thing we need to do is pass new legislation. And we want to make sure that that new legislation means that if you come here illegally to our country, you will not be able to stay. You will be detained and swiftly removed back to a safe country or your own home if that's appropriate. That's the type of system that I think makes sense. I think it's in extraordinarily common sense. I think everyone watching will think that's the type of system we should have. But as we've seen already with our Rwanda policy, there are plenty of people who will try and stop that from happening. But what I want to make sure that the country knows is I'm working day and night to deliver that system, and the next step on that journey is to introduce new laws that will allow us to put that system in place. But that is not going to happen overnight, but that is what people will see us working very hard on in the coming weeks and months. Jason Groves from the Mail.
Thanks, PM. Don't you have to resolve the strikes that are going on if you're going to get peace of mind and get the growth that you want? And how are you going to do that without paying people more? Do you think you can legislate your way out of this problem?
Well, thanks, Jason. Look, on strikes, I really want to make sure the country and everyone understands the government's position, and that is that we hugely respect and value the work done by our public sector workers across the board, but obviously nurses are a part of that as well, and a special part of that. And I also want everyone to know that we're very keen on dialogue. The government's door is always open, the Transport Secretary's door, the Health Secretary's door. We're very keen to have constructive, two-way dialogue that's honest, that's open, where we can talk about the challenges everyone's facing and see what we can all do to find a resolution to these strikes. I've always been clear about that, and I wanted to reiterate that today. Now, I've said in this that you'll hear more from the government in the coming days about our approach. But my view is, people should always behave reasonably and fairly and make sure that what we're doing is centred around what's responsible for the country, what's affordable for the country. I think that's the right dialogue to be having, but I hope we can have that dialogue. But I've also said, much as I celebrate and value the work of unions in our society, they play an important role and people should have the right to strike, that has to be balanced with the right of the British public to be able to go about their lives without suffering completely undue disruption in the way that we've seen recently. And that's why I said we will introduce new legislation that restores that balance and crucially protects people's lives as well as their livelihoods. But you'll hear more from the government in the coming days on that. Ryan Saby, The Sun.
Prime Minister, you recently said that you had 2 years to turn things round. Today you say, judge me. If you don't get your priorities right and get things done, will the public have every right to send you packing?
Well, Ryan, the British public will make their decision, right? Like, my job is to deliver for them, right? And my job is to deliver for them on their priorities. I believe the country has 5 priorities. That's why I've made 5 promises today. Right? 5 very simple things that everyone can understand. Halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, and stop the boats. 5 promises that I have made, 5 things that my government will focus relentlessly on to make a difference to people's lives. But also, those things are the foundation of the better future that I want to create for our children and grandchildren. Right? They're not the end of my ambition, they're the start of my ambition. And that's why today I've sketched out what that better future looks like. And although we're not going to get there overnight, the things that I talked about are the immediate priorities for us to deliver. I'm confident we can make progress towards that better future as well. And I'm not focused on the politics, I'm not focused on anything else. I'm just focused on delivering on the things that I think are important to people. And that's what I get up to do every day, and that's what the rest of the government does as well. George Parker at the FT.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You said at the outset that you wanted to bring peace of mind. I think you're probably aware that in one area at least you're creating more uncertainty and distress, and that's in the area of revoking or repealing up to 4,000 pieces of EU legislation by the end of the year. 12 organisations from the TUC to the Institute of Directors pleaded with you last year to abandon the end of 2023 deadline. Why don't you give them that assurance today that there won't be this huge upheaval at the end of the year?
Well, George, in my speech, I talked about the future economy that we need to build. Right? And it's an economy that's built on innovation. That is the best way for us to raise our growth rate, which is something I know everybody wants to see. And a big part of that is making sure that we do seize the opportunities of Brexit and make sure that our regulations are agile, that they support innovation and do so particularly in the growth industries of the future. And that's why the Chancellor's talked about delivering exactly that, whether it's in AI, whether it's in quantum, whether it's in life sciences or fintech. And I think that's really important, and we are going to deliver that. And if we do, that's how we create jobs in every part of our country. That's how we make sure people's living standards rise. It's how we spread prosperity. It's how we are competitive around the world. So it's an important part of delivering on making sure that the UK is the most innovative place in the world. And we have new opportunities and freedoms to do that, and we are absolutely going to seize them to deliver for the country. Pippa Creer from The Guardian.
Thanks, Prime Minister. You say that nurses and NHS staff are special. All the polls tell us that the public overwhelmingly agrees, but also that they support the strike action being taken by nurses and hospital workers. You also say you're keen on dialogue with the unions. So can you explain why you aren't willing to negotiate their pay? And would you look again at nurses' pensions, bonuses and holiday pay instead? And finally, can you rule out raising NHS staff salaries by just 2% next year, as you're reportedly planning? Thank you.
So Pippa, of course the NHS is special. Right? It's special to me because of the family that I grew up in, but it's special to all of us because of the care it provides us at times when we really need it. And I'm really grateful to our nurses and everyone else in the NHS for the incredible job they do, particularly over the last couple of years, which has been trying for them because of COVID. When it comes to dialogue, I'd repeat what I said before. The door is always open for dialogue. The Health Secretary was out this morning talking to healthcare workers. The Rail Minister is sitting down with transport unions early next week. And we're always, as I said previously, we want to have good two-way, open, honest conversations. Those have to be rooted in what's reasonable, what's affordable, what's responsible for the country. And I'm keen to have those conversations. There's lots of things that we can talk about. And I'm hopeful. Well, as I said on pay, conversations need to be based on what is affordable. I think a 19% pay rise is not affordable. I don't think anyone thinks that a 19% pay rise is affordable. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have dialogue, that we shouldn't have conversations. You talked about next year. We're about to start a new process for pay for this year. That's exactly the kind of thing that we should be sitting down and talking to the unions about before everyone submits evidence to that independent process to understand where we're all coming from. And as I say, we'll be setting out more of our plans in this regard in the coming days. Kate McCann, Talk TV.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You've made 5 promises today, but your predecessors also made a promise, a big one, to reform social care, and you were part of the government that were supposed to deliver on that. They've rowed back. You are accused of doing the same. Now, you've just accepted that one of the biggest challenges the NHS faces is social care. And you've also promised big thinking and no quick fixes, but there's still no plan to deal with the social care problem. So how can people trust you to deliver on 5 more pledges today when you're yet to deliver on this one? And will you resign if you don't?
So, Kate, when you talk about social care, on top of the money that I announced as Chancellor. So I don't think anyone can say that we're not prioritising social care. It's never had more investment. And the reason it's so important is because not only do people deserve and need high quality social care, but it is the cause of many of the delays that we're seeing in our urgent care departments and our A&E departments and with ambulances, because as I said, we've got 13,000 people occupying hospital beds that ideally should be back in their communities or in social care settings. So it's a big part of how we actually improve emergency wait times. That's why we've prioritised it. And that's why we have a discharge fund for this winter particularly to do exactly that. It's why we're investing in the social care workforce, something that they've cried out for rightly for years. And now we're doing it. We're introducing a sense of career progression for the first time, high quality certification and qualifications and training, all the things that were not there previously that have led to some of the kind of high or the low retention rates you've seen in the sector, the vacancies. A big part of the reason for that is people not feeling valued. And that's more than just about how much they're paid. It's about all those other things I talked about. The investment we're putting in is going to deliver that, and people are going to see that change. But what you're talking about, I think, is something slightly different, which is about the caps on care. That has been delayed. Yes, because right now we have got an enormous priority, as we're all seeing on our TV screens, and it's important that we fix that priority. And as actually many in local government called on us to do, was to delay those reforms so that we could focus that same money, which by the way is still going into social care, but is now being used to deal with the immediate pressures that we're facing. That's the right thing to do. I think everyone agrees that that's the right thing to do, because we can't do everything. And right now, actually just creating more social care capacity, making sure that our social care workers are properly valued, have the respect that they deserve, the career progression that they want, those are the right priorities. And not only if we do that will we improve social care in this country, we'll also improve the experience people are having currently with ambulances and A&E, and I'm confident that we can make progress on that. Andy Bell, Channel 5.
Thanks, Prime Minister. To all those people who are worried about the state of the NHS, to all those people working in the NHS who wonder if it can keep going, are you really saying there's no more money? You've had what you're getting. It's been announced there isn't going to be any more. Now you get on with it. Is that what you're saying, in effect, to them?
Well, Andy, I'm saying a couple of things. First of all, thank you for the incredible job they do. And I know that over the past 2 years. We all know that. And also I grew up in an NHS family. So I know how important high-quality healthcare is to people. I saw my parents doing it day in, day out for decades. And with regard to resources, it's right that we fund the NHS well, and we are. And that's why, in spite of the difficult decisions we had to make elsewhere, we have found extra money for the NHS and social care. And I think that was recognised by many independent people at the time of the autumn statement, that we had prioritised the NHS, that we had listened and put more funding in. Now, a conversation of how that funding is split up and how much should be on pay versus actually having more nurses, or how much it should be going on more diagnostic equipment, right? Those are the decisions that we and the NHS are making. That's why we have an independent process on pay, rightly, that the RCN, I think, were one of the people, they called for it in the 80s, that there should be an independent pay review body process, and the government has respected those decisions. Right, those are independent processes. They make recommendations to the government, in many cases higher than what the government initially suggested, and higher than what many people in the private sector are receiving, but accepted them in full because that's the right thing to do. But as I said previously to Beth and others, and to Pippa, we're always happy to have a dialogue. The door is always open. We're talking about the process for next year. That's exactly the kind of thing we should be sitting down and talking through. And it's not just about pay. I'm sure when you are out and about talking to whether it's ambulance workers or others, there's things about how their job is working that they would like to see improved, right? And that's some of the things that we did with nurses in the past. They wanted to see more support for their professional development. You know what? We instituted a £1,000 training budget, something the RCN really wanted us to do. It wasn't about pay, it was about supporting nurses once they qualified to be upskilled, to learn more and to train more. So we put a £1,000 training budget for every nurse and midwife. Right? They wanted nurses' bursaries reintroduced. We delivered that too. It's £5,000 a year for a nurse that's in training. Right, so there's lots of things that are not necessarily pay that are also important, and we should be talking about all of these things, and the door is always open to talk about them.